Turn down the lights. Welcome back. It's KBS After Dark. We're back. We're live. Are we live? I think we're live. Yes, yes. Yes, yes, and yes again. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Live on the After Dark stream. Yes, indeed. I told you we were going to do more of our late night antics. Yes, indeed. And of course, in typical fashion, as soon as I go live, I get a tickly throat. Bear with me, folks. Bear with me. The Wookie of coffee. Yes, indeed. So, let me pull up the chat room before we go anywhere. We have got Bet. We have got Rose, Cinemonk, the Wookie, ZX81. Also got Carol in there, Bet, Rose, who was first. Jules was first today. And of course, Jules will be on the Kev Baker show later today if you're in the UK, tomorrow if you're in the US. And she'll be on with Nano Girl. We'll be getting into a whole host of sci-fi topics. Yes, indeed. But tonight, here, right now, and a big shout out to Jocelyn and William as well, to see them in the chat room. Any latecomers, big shout out to you. But I had some really good fun the other night when we done our late night after dark /r/no sleep. I'm going to have to really kind of drill down on a name for these shows. I think we're going to go with No Sleep, even though it says After Dark up the top. Maybe we should go for After Dark. I don't know. Maybe I should just let all of you great people out there decide. What do you think? What do you think? But listen, I've got one story pulled up for us, getting ready to rock and roll for our first little story of the day, which is going to be called The Camp Creature. Now, after that, I'm going to be asking you in the audience which story we go to next. I will give you a choice of 3 stories that we can go to. And from there, we'll do a quick poll and then we'll get into that next story and we'll see where it takes us. It's going to be a magical mystery tour of the weird and wonderful world of Reddit's r/no sleep forum. Yes, indeedy. So I'm looking forward to this. I hope you're looking forward to it. My son is praying that we have something on the level of the man dressed as a dog type material coming to our stream today. I can't promise, but when you go into Reddit's r/no sleep, stranger things have happened. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen, stranger things have happened. So I'm going to get a quick drink of coffee before we launch into this and we get into our KBS After Dark. This one gets the vibration going, right? Gets us in the mood for some creepiness, some high strangeness, and going straight smack bang across the middle of the uncanny valley. Remember to hit like, hit share, and let's get people over here for the late night scare. Yes, Bet, where is Bernays? Usually when you're around, Bernays is around. What's happened? Is there a disturbance in the force? There we go. So are we ready to launch into our first story, ladies and gentlemen? I think we are. And today's first story is a nice, easy icebreaker for today's woo. It's called Camp Creature. And I ain't talking about a sexual preference. No, ladies and gentlemen. Let us get into our r/no sleep here on KBS After Dark. Wrong voice, but we'll go with it. Okay? That's the one I was after, I think, is it?
No, that's it. There we go.
Anywho, Camp Creature. Hey, I know that this isn't a super scary story, but I wanted to know what everyone thought of my experience. And I know this sounds like any horror story, but it has really stuck with me. You see, I was staying at a summer camp when I was around 12 years old. All of the girls there were really nice and it seemed to be normal. The food was good, the beds were comfortable, and the only thing wrong was that it was very deep into the woods. And when I say deep, I mean deep. I'd say it was a 60-mile walk from the end of the camp to the nearest paved road. Otherwise, it seemed to be very normal and fun. Also, I had a very difficult time sleeping. And when I talked to the other girls, they also would wake up for no apparent reason. I had brought my own watch to camp, and I would always wake up around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And if I had been able to fall asleep at all, I would hear noises outside, but I just thought that they were animals. One night, I couldn't sleep at all, so I decided to get a counsellor to help me. This was around 3 o'clock, and I had not slept at all that night. They didn't sleep in our cabin, so I had to walk to go and get them. I was walking down the trail with just my flashlight when I thought I heard someone talking. It was odd though, because the noises were coming from the woods and not from another cabin. I turned my flashlight towards them, but turned it down a little bit so they wouldn't see me. Someone was kneeling, or more like crawling, in the bushes, and not just near the trail, maybe like 50 feet in. They seemed to be yelling, but not loudly, but very, very panicked. She was saying things like, "No, no, 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 no. Not here, not now. Please, God, no, help me. No, no, no. Please, God, stop, no." And these were just some of the things that she was saying. I was so surprised. I just froze and stared at her. I felt like I couldn't move. It was horrifying. I think that I stepped on a leaf or stick or something because her head started turning toward me. I recognized her as one of the counsellors. And when I looked into her eyes, it looked like sheer panic. Then her eyes changed, I guess. They narrowed and looked sickly happy. She started to crawl towards me. Not normal crawling. Her legs and her arms were flying in all directions, and she was moving very quickly. The whole time there was an odd, sick smile on her face, and I still have nightmares about it almost every week. I just don't know how to explain this, but this thing was not human. I ran back to my cabin as fast as I could, and thankfully I was on the top bunk, so I felt safer as I hid under my covers. I didn't sleep a wink that night because the whole night I could hear scratching and knocking near the door. Well, I guess I may have slept for a few minutes, but at least because I remember waking up. I thought it was a dream, but everyone in my cabin had also heard the knocking. The girl was acting completely normal the next day. Is there anything that makes people wake for no reasons and would make a person behave this way? Can someone out there please help me understand? So yes, that is our little warm-up story for today, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully things will get a lot creepier, a lot stranger from here on in. But go, grab yourself a quick coffee, get a drink, turn down the lights, kick back, get ready, relax, and get ready for some more KBS After Dark. Indeed. So I told you it was a nice tame one to get us going. But now we crowdsource the woo. Yes, I'm going to give you the choice of 3 different stories. That's 3 different stories, ladies and gentlemen. Number 1, and you have to put this in the chat if you'd like to hear this story. Let me just write them down first. 2. Neighbors. Don't worry, folks. It's worth waiting for. I hope. Number 3. Okay. Do you want, number 1, a story about a care facility, an elderly home? Type 1. If you would like to hear about the neighbour's cat story, type 2. If you would like to hear about a new house with a forbidden door, type 3. And if you would want to hear the one that is called I Was Kidnapped from Work by 2 Men, and one of them was called a Necromancer, number 4. So that's 1 for the care home woo, 2 for the neighbour's cat, 3 for a forbidden door, and 4 for the Necromancer. Let's say let's wait for the votes to come in, folks. Number 3. So that's the forbidden door from Connie. Yeah, get them in quick, folks. Get them in quick. Get them in quick. Oh, 3 for the forbidden door. The Necromancer's coming in with 1. Oh, 3. It's looking like a resounding 3, 4, 4. Oh, 3, 3, 3. I think we're going to do the forbidden door and then the Necromancer. Yep, 3. Doug, thank you. Christopher, 4. Connie, 4. Phoebe, 4. Connie, 4. 4, 4. 3, 4. 4. Okay. Jules, 3. Okay. That's all right. Because we're going to do both. So I'm going to go to number 3 first. The forbidden door. Let me pull this one up. Here we go. Don't you worry. The Necromancer will be coming next. Ladies and gentlemen, the Necromancer will be coming next. But first up, you chose the story about a new house and a door that's been forbidden for anyone to go through. It says here, I've come to learn that there are certain feelings that come along with purchasing a new house. Now, these feelings can include extreme happiness, giddiness, and excitement as the new homeowner starts to think of all the things that can be done with the home. Perhaps they will think of raising a family, or thinking about the prospect about being able to have more people over to host parties, or even just enjoy the luxurious space that they can now call home. They might even feel a bit of pride, as becoming a homeowner is admittedly an accomplishment and a milestone that people yearn to achieve. As a freshman in college and looking at the house in front of me, I thought none of these things. I cannot exactly think of a word to describe the feeling that looking at the house gave me, except perhaps disorientating. It looked fairly similar to those around it. It was small, modest, and maybe a little bit run down. However, it wasn't any of these things that made me feel disorientated. No, it was the fact that the house seemed to have a personality. It had qualities I couldn't quite explain. Nevertheless, a house is just a house, right? And it was all I could afford at the time. It had actually been my grandfather's, which had been left to me when he passed away a few years back. I didn't want to find a roommate to split the cost of an apartment, Instead of taking on multiple jobs to pay for an apartment for myself close to college that I was attending, I just decided to move into my grandfather's old house. It was a bit out of the city, admittedly, but the commute was fine, and it was much cheaper than any alternative. So I have never really visited my grandfather at his house, since he always flew down to visit us. So I didn't really know what to expect. And that's how I ended up standing there in front of the house, moving boxes still in my car, and with me standing on the front step, the key clutched in my hand, as I stared up at the house in front of me. Apprehension and nervousness started to seep in the longer that I looked at it. I don't know what was wrong with me. I was probably just being stupid, but the house just had a feeling of dread, of negative emotions around it, like an aura, if you will. Now, I know you're saying I'm probably being stupid, and your grandpa didn't have any issues with the house, and neither will you. And sure, that's what I told myself. I was immersed in my own thoughts, trying to convince myself that I was being utterly ridiculous. "Hey!" a voice rang out behind me. I startled, nearly jumping out of my skin as I whipped around to find the source of the voice. I half expected to see some crazy old man with a cane coming to warn me about the house being haunted, or maybe a crackhead. In Portland, you could never be sure. To my immense relief, however, it was neither of these things. It was a boy who looked to be around my age, standing on the sidewalk, and he was tall, a bit taller than me, with messy dark hair and dark blue eyes. Looking at him, I couldn't decide if his hair was really dark brown or just black. He looked sheepish as I turned around. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you, but you just moved in, right?" he said, motioning to the house behind me. My heartbeat was still pounding, but I managed to swallow and nod. "Oh, yeah. Well, I just got here. I've yet to move in, so to speak, and the boxes are still in my car," I stammered. The boy looked at the car before looking back at me with a smile. "Ah, I see. Well, let me help. It'll go faster," he said, starting to move up the path that led to the house. So I was slightly taken aback, but managed to compose myself as he approached. On one hand, I wasn't crazy about the idea of a complete stranger helping me move into my house, but on the other hand, he seemed harmless, and it was going to take me an eternity to move everything in by myself. "Well, that's really kind of you. You don't have to, though. Most of the boxes are actually really heavy," I said as I looked at him. "I'm sure I can handle it. It was the neighbours, or it's what neighbours are for, right?" he said with another small smile. Confusion crossed briefly across my face as I looked at him. "You're my neighbour?" I asked, glancing behind me at the neighbouring houses to mine. "Yep, that one right there," he said, pointing to a house on the right side of mine. It looked a lot more loved and cared for than mine did. I turned back to him, slightly more at ease, knowing that he was my neighbour and that he didn't look like a crackhead. "Ah, gotcha," I said. "Well, if you seriously don't mind, I sure would appreciate your help," I said, giving him a small smile of my own, something inside of me telling me just to trust him. And the boy beamed. I unlocked the car and popped open the trunk, walking alongside the boy as we walked over. "I really appreciate this. I'm Ethan, by the way," I said, holding out my hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ethan. I'm Avery." So we spent the next while moving boxes into the house, chatting and making small talk while doing so. Talking to Avery distracted me temporarily from the fact that as soon as I stepped inside the house, the feeling I got when I looked at it from the outside was amplified by about 100. It was really quite cold, with a sickening sense of unease to match the musty kind of character that the interior had. Trying to shake it off, I focused on unloading the boxes. Now, after the last box had been put away in the house, I brushed my hands off my pants and looked around, smiling slightly at Avery, who had put the final box on the kitchen counter. Hey, I can't thank you enough for helping me out, I said, to which Avery gave me a small shrug. It was really no problem. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me, he said, returning my smile before looking around at the house. No one has lived in this house for a while, but it's sturdy and a great house. In need of a few touch-ups, but otherwise really great. Let me know if you need any help with anything, he said before looking back at me. I'll keep that in mind. The house isn't haunted or anything, is it? I said, teasing in my voice. I expected Avery to laugh, or to even smile, but to my surprise, he looked more than uncomfortable. Well, you see, that's something that I wanted to mention, he started, pushing a hand through his hair. Looking at my expression, he hastily rushed to speak again. It's not haunted. It's just that there is one thing you should know. This is an old house and has some pretty weird history, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. At night, you might find a yellow door in different spots in the house. You cannot open it under any circumstances. In fact, don't touch it. Don't interact with it. And I can tell you why. But please trust me. I can't tell you why. But please trust me that it's in your best interest, Avery said, finally looking up at me. Now, maybe he was a crackhead after all, I'm not sure. A yellow door that only showed up at night? Please. I mean, I might be skeptical when it came to the paranormal and stuff, but this was a whole new level. Maybe this was some sort of hazing that the neighbours did for new homeowners in the area. I don't know. Okay, if I see one, I'll leave it alone, I said, playing along and giving a small smile. Avery didn't return it. Instead, he looked relieved. Awesome. Okay, well, as long as you follow that rule, you should be all set. I actually have to run right now to a class, but here's my number in case you need anything, he said, pulling a piece of paper and pen from his pocket and scribbling down a number before setting it on the counter. I nodded, giving him a tight smile and waving as he left the house. As soon as he was gone, I let out a breath, the creeping feeling of unease coming back as I was left once again, all alone in the house. I spent the rest of the day unpacking and making the house feel a little bit more like home. The day went by, spent it unpacking and debating whether or not to make Avery a contact in my phone. Part of me really wanted to, grateful that he helped me move the boxes, but on the other hand, I was a bit annoyed at his take on hazing, talking nonsense about a yellow door. I tried not to overthink it. Instead, I called my parents to let them know that I was getting settled and started to get myself ready for bed. I made a mental note to replace some of the furniture to make the house a little more up to date as I settled into bed, checking to see what classes I had next week before finally putting my phone down and dozing off. As much as I hate to admit it, the last thing I thought about before drifting off to sleep was what Avery had said about the yellow door. And the next few weeks went by without anything exciting happening. Although college is a lot harder than people make it out to be, and my classes were changing every day, and my schedule was hectic. I was stressed, since in order to maintain my scholarship, I had to have perfect grades in all of my classes. And I tried not to show it, still being socially active and going out. But I was constantly exhausted, and the goddamn house wasn't helping. The house was old, I would give it that, but it was difficult to fall asleep since every time I tried to, the house decided it was a perfect time to start creaking and making general old house noises. I didn't think about that yellow door anymore, chalking it up to the nonsense I originally thought it was, especially since Avery had never mentioned it again. Avery, come to mention it, was actually in a few of my classes, and I saw him regularly. He was actually really fun to be around, and I made quick friends with him, often getting coffee and such before, or getting coffee and such together before our morning classes. Far away from my parents, I let myself notice the little things about him, like how his mouth twisted to the side when he was deciding to laugh about something, or how he tapped his fingers against the surface when he was thinking. Sometimes he would be waiting on the sidewalk in the mornings, coffee already in hand for me, and when we hung out after school, sometimes we would go to my house. But he would never invite me into his. I'd also made a small group of friends with some people in the anomaly class, which actually counted towards my science credit since it was classed as natural sciences. Two of the people in our group were siblings, Ava and Liam, who had lived in Portland all of their life and showed me the best places to go for coffee and pizza, the necessities. There was also Lucas, who was a kind of loud, and then he thought of himself as a great physical comedian, which really only involved making loud, absurd comments and flicking rubber bands at people. Despite this, however, he was still fun to be around. And with being around Avery and my new group of friends, life was actually a lot more tolerable. And through my workload, although my workload hadn't decreased, I wasn't quite as stressed all of the time. Unfortunately, that didn't last long. I got lost there. Where did we get? Unfortunately, that didn't last long. It was a Friday, and after a week of bugging me, Lucas finally convinced me to throw a party at my house. I'd never really thrown one before then, but Lucas helped, and by the time we were finished, it wasn't half bad. Lucas got the alcohol, since he had a fake ID, and once he brought it all into my house, I realised that I never asked actually how many people were going to show up. That's a ton of booze right there. How many people did you invite? I asked, to which he shrugged nonchalantly. Dunno, a bit, but mostly probably some of them won't show up, he said, his words careless and sure. I was already jittery and nervous about the entire prospect, already having second thoughts. What if the cops showed up? What if the neighbours filed a noise complaint? Would that go on my permanent record? However, when I expressed these thoughts to Lucas, he punched me in the arm and told me to loosen up and to live a little. God, this truly was beginning to be a bad idea. Lucas went to the kitchen to start setting up some sort of station, and I pulled out my phone to call someone. It only rang twice before they picked up. Ethan? Hey, Avery, where are you right now? I asked, leaning against a wall, trying to sound casual. I'm going to my last class of the day. What do you need? He replied. I looked down the corner to make sure Lucas was still in the kitchen. Oh, I don't need anything. I was just calling to ask you a question. I was going to text, but then I decided I would call, since that would be better. And so that brings us to now, I said, cutting myself off in the middle of my ramble. God, what was wrong with me? Okay, I've got you, so what's the question? Avery replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I tried clearing my throat. Well, I'm sort of throwing a party tonight, and I was wondering if you wanted to come. Starts around 10, I said, leaning my head back against the wall. And I know, folks, I don't really do a very good female voice, but hey, it is what it is. There was a short pause, to which was enough time for me to become just a slight bit embarrassed. I mean, only if you want to. You don't have to. I was just... excuse me. And then I started to stammer. But Avery's voice cut me off. No, sorry. I was just thinking, I'd love to come over. I'll see you at 10. He finally said, his voice soft and smiling. And in that moment, I was immensely glad that he couldn't see the idiot smile that came across my face. Yes, 10 o'clock, I'll see you later, I replied, deciding to hang up while I was still ahead. So a few hours later, people started to arrive. A lot of people. Drink a coffee, folks. Eventually, I stopped opening the door and just left it unlocked for people to come in. I had been a few parties in high school, but nothing compared to this. I didn't really have the taste for alcohol, but Lucas had started following me around with red cups in his hand, telling me that I needed to live a little more. After a while of this, I finally grabbed one from his hand and drained it just to shut him up. Admittedly, this was a pretty bad idea, but it was also coming up to 11 and there was still no sign of Avery. I felt stupid and embarrassed, and not wanting to sort through my feelings right then, I decided to get another drink. More and more cups kept finding their way into my hands until my vision was starting to get blurry and the room developed a tilt. I've never done anything like this before, the entire night feeling like everything I was doing was an out-of-body experience. I just put my hands on the counter in the kitchen, ignoring the sticky spills of alcohol and overturned cartons of mixers that I'd have to clean up later. I closed my eyes, trying to get the room to stop spinning, when I felt a hand on my arm. "Ethan?" a soft voice asked. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. I turned away, being greeted by a tall, dark-haired figure with a sheepish expression. I glanced at the clock and it was 1:34 a.m. "Hey," I said, leaning up against the counter and trying to get my vision to focus. "I'm so sorry I'm late. I got caught up with something that needed to be done." "I'm really sorry," he said quietly, putting his hands in his pockets. And I looked at him for a moment before shaking my head and running a hand over my face. "No, it's no problem, really. You just needed to take care of whatever you needed to take care of," I said, slurring my last words. At this point, I didn't even care. Avery looked like he was about to say something, but a sudden wave of nausea washed over me, making my eyes widen for my hand to grip the counter behind me. And Avery didn't miss this. So he took my arm, quickly leading me to the bathroom, looking relieved to find it was empty. He got me in front of the wide basin sink just in time. So he stayed with me for a while, pushing the longer strands of my hair away, keeping my hand on my back. Finally, when there was nothing left in me to throw up, I sank to the floor, leaning my head back against the tile wall next to Avery. And I couldn't remember a time where I had felt worse. "You don't have to stay," I mumbled, pushing a shaking hand through my hair. My entire body was shaking, a mixture of just having thrown up, what felt like my entire body contents, and the rush of emotions that I'd been ignoring all night. "I know," Avery said softly. Without another word, he moved closer, putting an arm around me and pulling me against his chest. I didn't move away. I was very mad at Avery for making me feel stupid, for making me feel like a little kid with an elementary school crush. I wanted to be mad, to let myself stay mad, but the longer we sat like that together, the longer I knew that I couldn't. I wanted him close. I wanted to keep feeling like the comfort and protection that being around him made me feel. "Avery," I said, my voice crackling slightly. "Yeah," he replied, matching the soft tone that I had. "Please don't go," I said softly. And I didn't say anything else because I didn't need to. The way that his arm tightened around me and the way that he moved closer so that we were flush against each other was the only answer that I needed to know that he understood. We sat like that for a while until the room stopped spinning, and finally started to feel more like myself, until I started to become more aware of my surroundings. Aware of Avery's arm around me, aware of the ticking clock above the door, aware of the rush of exhaustion slowly creeping up on me. And sitting there against Avery, I let my eyes close. I let my body relax against his. And I was tired of being the one who felt all of these conflicting emotions. Tired of being the one to prove myself to others. I was just tired in general. Eventually, I couldn't keep myself awake. 3:34 a.m. Ever since I was a little kid, I always remember falling asleep, even on weird places like airplanes. As a noise startled me out of sleep, I realized that this was the first time that I hadn't. It took my brain a moment to register where I was, and sitting up, I realized that I was in my room, which meant that somebody had taken me up there. Normally, I'd have been freaking out, but I was oddly calm as my brain tried to walk through the most likely situation. I probably fell asleep on Avery downstairs, and he just brought me up here and made sure everyone cleared out of the house. Sitting up, my mind still felt all hazy, and I had the beginnings of a headache, but other than that, I was fine. I glanced at the clock, and it was 3:34 a.m. It was then when I heard the breathing. I didn't have any pets, and it wasn't my breathing. Somebody or something was in the room. My heart started to pick up speed as I sat up a little straighter and looked around, careful not to make too much noise. There it was, a figure laying down beside my bed on the floor. A tall figure with dark hair. I let out a sigh of relief. It was just Avery. My mind worked for a second to think as to why he was still here with me when it hit me. I had asked him not to leave, and he had taken that request quite seriously, along with probably making sure that I didn't suffocate in my sleep or throw up again. He was asleep, with his arm under his head serving as a pillow. I smiled down at him, appreciation and admiration surging through me. I briefly wondered what it was that woke me up, but that thought moved from my mind as I realized suddenly that I was really quite thirsty, my throat feeling rough and dry. I silently moved away from the bed so as not to disturb Avery, still feeling slightly sick as I made my way out to the hallway. I just turned around the corner to walk downstairs when a violent bang came from the other end of the hallway, making me jump and turn. My breath seemed to catch in my throat, and my eyes landed on the source of the noise. It was a yellow door. My heart hammered in my chest as my eyes were glued to it. Maybe I'm still drunk. Maybe it's a hallucination, I told myself. My feet started to move me towards the door without even thinking about it. As I got closer, I could see that it had originally been a bright red door, but now it looked like somebody had painted over it messily with a vibrant yellow paint. And then, all of a sudden, the house felt very, very cold. It went very quiet, as if somebody had literally sucked the life out of it. The stillness was disorientating. How could I have never seen this door? That was the only thing I could think. I must have missed it. I didn't hang around much upstairs, admittedly, but how could I have missed it? Maybe it was Avery's idea of a prank, a joke, catching me off guard when he had warned me about it when we first met. I was only a few feet away, and I placed my hand on the doorknob. What would happen if I opened it? A jump scare? Probably. Just get the joke over with, I told myself, and I twisted the doorknob and pushed the door open, bracing myself for some kind of practical scare, only nothing came. Instead, on the other side of the door was just a room. A nagging little voice told me not to go in, but curiosity had already overpowered logic today. And you guessed it, I stepped through. Looking around, I saw that I was back in my room. Confusion washed over me. It wasn't possible. Turning around, I could still see the hallway and my bedroom door. My real bedroom. I turned back to look at the room I was in, and I looked at the clock and it was 3:34 a.m. Suddenly, there was a terrible yelling coming from behind me. I whipped around, seen Avery at the other end of the hallway, running towards me, calling my name, panic in his eyes and voice. A cold, high giggle erupted out of nowhere as the door between us slammed. Avery, Avery, I yelled, rushing to the door, rattling the doorknob. It wouldn't open. Ethan, I heard him yell from the other side. So Ethan and Avery. Okay, I'm coming out. I'm coming, he yelled, pounding on the door as panic seized my chest. What the actual fuck was happening? A noise came from behind me, from the other side of the room. I turned around, my heart stopping in my chest. It was a tall, black figure. Its limbs were too long, too thin, a black, smeared face with a white, painted mouth perched on the bed, and it was just grinning. I wanted to scream, but my voice got stuck in my throat. I could hear Avery banging on the door behind me, banging and banging. Suddenly, a voice came out of whatever this thing was. It was speaking, but the mouth wasn't moving. Curiosity may have killed the cat, or more like the cat was just unlucky, or else curious to see what death was like, having no cause to go on licking paws, or fathering litter on litter of kittens, predictably, the thing said, moving closer, its head cocked at an impossible angle. Are you the cat? It asked. And I didn't even have the chance to answer before suddenly this thing came at me, its long limbs reaching out for me. Its long, black hand grabbed my ankle, pulling me down. And as soon as it touched me, white light blinded my vision as I screamed. Pictures of things were rapidly racing through my mind. None of them were things that I recognized. A baseball field, a glass window, a blonde, a brunette, a river, a store. Picture after picture flipped through my mind as I could feel the thing dragging me closer. Its jaw becoming unhinged, opening wider and wider, too wide to be anything natural. Behind me, I heard the door finally slam open, like somebody had broken it, but I hardly even noticed. Yells, followed by a horrible screeching noise, filled the room as I felt hands on me, dragging me away. Gentle hands, human hands. And the picture finally stopped as the black started to fill my vision. And for that second time that night, I felt myself fade out of consciousness. Avery and I don't talk much about what happened 5 years ago. We live in an apartment downtown together now, far away from my grandfather's house, although the house was only half of the problem. I've asked Avery many questions, most of which he tried to answer, but many others were left to my imagination. Sometimes I still have nightmares about that Friday night, but Avery's always there to wake me up, to remind me that I'm safe, that I'm okay. And sometimes, late at night, when I want to get, or when I went to get water or to go to the bathroom, I saw the yellow door. I never went near it again, instead, retreating back into my room where I could be next to Avery, where I could wait it out until the following morning. After all, I didn't want to be the cat. Big thank you to everyone who's joined us on today's After Dark. Reddit's weird, creepy, uncanny valley. A strange assortment of stories that you find on the r/nosleep forum on Reddit. We're dipping our toe into the weirdness today. When we come back after this brief hiatus, this little brief break for me to get a drink of coffee, and let me say PPP, smoke them if you've got them, we will get into the weird and wonderful world of I was kidnapped from work by two guys, and one of them
Was a necromancer.
Come on, man.
Excuse me, it's ma'am.
Are you serious?
How dare you?
Some creepy little
tunes there, right? Ooh, that was quite a good one. Beware the yellow door. It was a bit long for waiting to get to the yellow door, but hey, that's what our random no sleep show is all about. To turn down the lights a bit more because I think the next one could get really creepy really fast. We're getting into the world of necromancy, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, indeed. So the next story is entitled, I was kidnapped from work by two guys. One of them was a necromancer. I worked at the midnight shift at a gas station by the highway. It's a pretty easygoing gig. I do have some sketchy characters come in from time to time. They don't usually cause that much trouble though. Aside from people stealing small items like chips or chocolate bars, the worst thing that's ever happened was people trashing the bathroom. That was until those two showed up. Now, I didn't pay much attention to them when they first walked in. My head was down in the middle of a magazine aimed towards girls. I wasn't the type to read such things, but the blurb on the front of it enticed me. For hours, the magazine mocked me from the stand across the counter. I finally caved in and flipped to the article's 15 things guys hate in bed. I was expecting a fluff piece, but it was so graphic the entire magazine horrified me. Who writes this crap, I thought. I mean, really. I had chills wondering if these things were as common that they had to write an article about it. The bell chimed saying somebody had walked into the store. Now, they had parked their car out front, but they weren't getting gas. And I only gave them a glance and let my eyes drift down to the magazine once more. It was impossible not to hear what they were saying as they went back and forth to the slush station. You said we need supplies, hissed a voice, and he sounded very tense. Snacks are supplies. You have your wallet, right? The second man had a lighter voice, and he was helping himself to a slush drink, and it sounded like he was pouring out every flavour the machine had into one large cup. We don't have time for this, and why the hell am I paying? I peered over my magazine to try and get a look at them. The one sounded so angry I was worried he might start a fight soon. Now the shelves of products made it hard to see them. The annoyed man was shorter than his companion. I couldn't see him because of the chip display, and the other was tall enough for me to see he had pulled back long hair, and oddly enough, being at night, sunglasses. Now anyone wearing sunglasses at night was either up to no good, or was trying to look cool, but trying too hard. The taller man gave a dismissive wave and started to go between the shelves, picking up bags of chips and anything else that he fancied. The shorter one followed behind him, nearly stomping and fuming. He stayed silent as the other man started to hand him snacks he couldn't carry due to holding the drink. And at this point, my magazine had been forgotten. I was watching while trying not to make it too obvious. To be honest, they were the oddest pair that had come into the store for months. You're the one who said we only had until sunrise. Just pick up one already. The taller man had stopped in front of the jerky display and spent a few minutes trying to decide between two flavours. The other man couldn't take it any longer and exploded. I really thought a fight was about to happen. I just put down the magazine, now not caring if they were watching me or not. I stood up ready to call for backup or break it up if I thought it was safe. I didn't need to. All fury went out of the man's face when the sunglasses man turned and smiled at him. That was all. Just a smile. It looked like a normal expression to me, but even I could feel as if something was, well, off about it. He took a step back from his tall companion, arms full of snacks, and looked away. I'd never seen somebody so culled silently before. I started to wonder just who the hell the taller man was. Scooping up 3 packs of jerky into his hand, they finally made it to the counter. And he already drank half his slushy by the time everything had been set down. Saying nothing, I started to scan the mass of items sneaking glances up at the pair. The sunglasses man was still smiling, and it unnerved me in a way that I find hard to describe. The other man wasn't looking at me at all. It was all feeling so awkward, and I was glad when the bell chimed again and broke the tension a little. I heard a groan after the tinkling of the bell. I smelled the newcomer first. A sharp smell with a hint of rot. I looked over at the door and froze. The bag of chips slipped from my hand, but my body refused to move. The two men followed my line of sight, and the smile never faded from the taller man's face, but it changed to a stressed one, and the other man's face turned ghost white. Finally, I was moving, rushing to the door and to the person who had just come inside. He was badly injured. His head with a nasty gash, with dried blood all run down his face. His clothing was ruined with dirt and more old blood on them. He honestly looked and smelled like he had already passed. But he was stumbling inside, still on his feet somehow. My first reaction was get him to sit down and see how badly he was hurt. He needed to get to a hospital. "Call an ambulance," I shouted while rushing over to the injured man. My stomach turned at the sight of him, and the smell. How could somebody look as bad as he did and was still standing? In my panic, I didn't even consider the two by the counter may have something to do with who had just walked in. When I was within arm's reach of the man, my entire body screamed at me, "Stop!" I jerked, my feet planted on the ground, refusing to move. My brain had to catch up to my instincts and find out just why it was I stopped. The man didn't even notice me. He only looked beyond me with dead eyes. Truly dead eyes. The smell in his eyes were telling me something I just couldn't accept. It wasn't that he just looked like he had passed. He was literally a corpse. A standing upright, stumbling corpse. "I told you to lock him in the car," I heard a voice of the taller man behind me. "You have the keys. How could I lock him in? Besides, he had his seatbelt on. How the hell can he undo that and open the car door?" The other man sounded shrilled, and in a panic, I risked a glance behind me. Mr. Sunglasses still had that smile on his face, but it looked sinister in the artificial light. He noticed me staring. In 3 large strides, he was right behind me. My only other choice was him or the man in front of me. I could not bring myself to walk towards what smelled like a corpse, and I felt a strong hand grab me by the back of my neck and lift me up like a kitten. There was no way this thin man should have been able to just pluck me off my feet like that. He took a sip of his drink and started to walk with me in front. I thrashed and struggled, trying to get free. What the hell's going on?" I demanded while struggling. I only ended up getting tangled in my shirt and looking pretty foolish considering the situation. "I'm sorry, but we can't have witnesses." His voice was still kind, but my stomach dropped when the trunk of their car popped open. Before I could struggle free, I was tossed in the trunk and trapped inside. I looked for a latch that would open it and kicked violently at the back seat, praying it would flip open into the car. Nothing. Nothing I did worked. With some horror, I realized that he must have modified his car to make sure that the trunk couldn't be opened from the inside. I bumped against a spare tire and some tools meant to change said tire. I gripped the tire iron, thinking if he opens this trunk again, at least I have a weapon to defend myself. I still kicked and screamed, hoping that someone pulled into the station and either saw what happened or heard my screams and called the police. The gas station did have cameras, but I doubted I would be alive by the time 6 a.m. rolled around and my manager showed up. After what felt like years, the car started and we pulled away onto the road. My heart sank. I truly thought I was going to pass. Anyone taken to a secondary location almost always doesn't come home. Suddenly, the trunk felt too small. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't get air. And I had to force myself to calm down and try and figure things out. I had to make a plan. I could only worry about myself in that moment and not what on earth they had done with the other man that made him look like he was dead. Now, grasping a tire iron against my chest, I stared up into the dark, trying to compose myself. From the car, I heard music blaring. Music in a language I did not know. The music was so loud that there was no way my kicking and screaming would ever be heard over it. I was in that trunk of the car, literally scared stiff for what seemed like over an hour. And when you're in that position, an hour feels like your entire lifetime. I had just gotten a little bit under control when I heard an awful noise above the music. The car swerved and I was tossed around the trunk. We stopped moving. The music turned off. I heard muffled voices, but not what they were saying. Without warning, the trunk opened and a blinding light hit me. I lifted my weapon only to have it pulled from my hand. I waited, expecting to be forced out, and something bad happened. Do you know how to change a tire? Huh? I was stressed. Who could blame me for that response? When my eyes adjusted, I saw we were on the side of the road. The short man with a flashlight shining directly at me. The other man looking down at me. When I didn't give him a better answer in a few seconds, he started to close the trunk. Wait a minute. Wait. Yes, I do know how to change a tire. At that, I was pulled from the trunk and my weapon returned to me. I was so confused I didn't even think to use it. If I was useful, maybe, just maybe, they would let me go. Now, under some pretty intense supervision, I looked in the trunk trying to find what I needed for the change. To my greater fear and disappointment, I saw that there were one tool missing. I don't think we can. We don't have something to get the car lifted, so I can roll the new one on. Sweat was stinging my eyes. I was sure the pair were going to off me right then, ditch the car and just steal another one. I tightened my hand around the iron, thinking when was best to make a stand. And to my horror, the tall man walked over to the car, placed a hand under it, and lifted the whole damn thing off the ground. I just stared in stunned silence, not being able to accept what I was actually seeing. I'm single, still holding up the car. His face twitched, and I think he was trying to give me a wink under his sunglasses. I was still staring, mouth open with a hand on my shoulder, and it made me jump. Neff hits on everyone. Just try to deal with him, and I'll do my best to make sure you get back to your job. The short one sounded exhausted. At least I had the name of one of them. Unable to stop myself, I looked between them, utterly confused. Who the hell are you two, and what the hell is going on? Thankfully, they decided to tell me. As I worked at changing the tire, I was told about what I had been caught up in. Murray, the shorter one, owed a lot of money to a lot of bad guys. His friend, who was now rotting in the back seat of the car, won it big. Knowing they both owed a bunch of scary and bad people, he decided to bury his earnings. He thought if no one knew the location, it would keep him alive. However, after burying the loot, he went on a bender and passed in a car crash. Now, Murray needed cash to save his life. His dead friend was the only one who knew the location of the life-saving money. Murray went to Neff, hearing that Neff could talk to the dead. He had no idea that this tall, strange man was the real deal. I thought he was a psychic. I don't believe in that nonsense either, but I figured he was the type to do research beforehand, pretending he was getting the information from the grave and might see something I missed. I only have 2 days left, so I was desperate, Murray explained. I was pretty shocked when it turned out he could make the corpse point the way to the missing cash. I would imagine something like a corpse raising costs a lot. That's honestly what it says there, folks. It doesn't make much sense, but how are you going to pay him when you need to drop off the buried loot to somebody else? And I was almost done with the new tire and wished it would take longer. Oh, I don't want the money. I told him I would do this if he gave me the corpse, Neff explained, not looking tired for holding up a car for so long. Here, I thought necromancers were the weak type. What do you want a corpse for? The question slipped out, and I regretted asking it right away. To be honest, I really didn't want to hear the answer. Geez, stop with the interrogations over here. Can't a guy have a hobby without being grilled non-stop about it? Do I ask what you do in your spare time? Huh? Do I? He was being so dramatic that I rolled my eyes and caught Murray's expression. On top of the stress of the days and of the dying in 2 days, unless he came up with a bundle of cash, this poor man had to deal with Neff for at least the whole day. I felt for him. And once the task was done, I tried to clean my hands on my uniform pants, and the car was in driving condition, and Murray got back into the front seat. The trunk was open again, and I gave the necromancer a desperate look. Really? I pleaded, not wanting to go back inside. If you want to ride in the back seat with the corpse, then fine. We put some air fresheners around the neck, but I think it's making it worse. Or I can get Murray to drive and you can sit in my lap in the front. I willingly crawled into the truck with those options. It's hard to know how much time passed in the dark, and I wondered if I was just losing it. This all couldn't be real, could it? Zombies and necromancers are just fantasy. I decided, as long as I lived through the night, I would believe anything until I was safe. When I was let outside again, we had stopped in front of a massive statue of an elephant, and I knew what town I was in, but it didn't help me. 2 secs, folks. There we go. Your corpse buddy says he buried the loot under the elephant's butt, Neff said, shovel in hand. Now, the corpse had been set loose, but he just shuffled along. He didn't look threatening after you got past a dead person walking around, and there was only one shovel, and Murray took it to start digging. I still can't believe that you can bring people back from the dead, even with him in front of me, I said, but mostly saying it to myself. I can't bring people back. Neff's voice was so somber and out of character for him, I had to look over just to make sure it was him talking. He may be walking around, but he's still gone. The one unwavering truth of this world is humans pass, and death is final. There is no bringing them back. Once they're gone, they're gone. No matter how much you desire to see them again, that person is gone. Humans do not come back from passing. Humans do not live forever. If they did, and if they do, they're not human. I heard Murray starting digging behind us, and I couldn't help but wonder again who Neff was. What in his past made him dabble in a job like trying to raise the dead? I wanted to ask him more about it, but when he pulled out a bag of beef jerky, my eyebrow raised. You didn't pay for that, did you? It felt like I was trapped out there for hours. I helped Murray dig, looking around for any sign of buried cash, while Neff sat in the car with his pilfered snacks. We only had one shovel, so when Murray got tired, I would take over, thinking it would speed up the process. I was still a little scared for my life, but I also had hope that they were just going to let me go when this was all over. And oddly enough, I thought Murray to be an alright guy. I wanted him to make it out of this alive. When we finally saw a dark object poke out from the dirt, We couldn't help but smile. With one final push of effort, we dug out a hefty duffel bag, and Murray had wet eyes when he opened it, and I saw stacks of cash inside. He quickly closed the zipper and looked up at me. "I'm sorry about kidnapping you," he said to me with a small, sheepish smile. I didn't blame him for it. I'd seen their zombie friend and they freaked. But after having time to think about it, there was no reason to keep me around. If I told the cops about them, I doubted anyone would believe my story anyway. They would go free, so there was no reason to do away with me. Neff took a hold of the shovel and no alarm bells rang. I thought he was going to put it back in the car. Him and Murray would just drive off, leaving me stranded and alive. I looked up at him and the fear returned when I saw that sinister smile on his face and the shovel raised above his head, ready to strike. On reflex, I grabbed Murray and we stumbled out of the small hole just as the shovel blade came down. It hit the ground so hard I was certain that it would have chopped us in half if it had hit its mark. I was so annoyed that if Neff was so strong, we could have found the bag much sooner if he helped us. I think I'd have been kind of, I don't know if I'd have been angry at him for that. I think I'd be trying to get out of there, but hey-oh. "What the hell is your problem?" Murray shouted, clutching the bag to his chest. "Problem? No problem," Neff said cheerfully, and yanked up the shovel from the ground. "I told you if I helped you to find the cash, you would give me a corpse." His bright voice gave me the chills. I knew what he was getting at, but Murray was very slow at arriving to the same train of thought. "You have one. It's stumbling around over there." "That one? That one? You think I want a half-rotted, week-old pile of garbage? Oh, no, sir. I need a fresh one. So, hold still and I won't make this hurt. One swing. I promise." He was coming towards us, but I didn't give him the chance. Once again, I grabbed Murray's arm and started to make a run for it. Neff was close behind. He was teasing us. A shrill, insane laugh came from him as he swung the shovel. Each time I felt the breeze from the blade as it narrowly missed us. And he didn't care which one of us he got. Maybe he wouldn't take both, or maybe he would take both. I was so stupid thinking that I could trust that madman. I looked over my shoulder when I heard the shovel miss us again and get stuck in the elephant's leg. Neff was trying to pry it loose when he looked over at me. Red lights glowed from behind his sunglasses, and his twisted smile was going to be in my nightmares if I lived. I ran, but Murray did not. He tripped just as Neff got his shovel loose, handle bent but still able to swing it. Murray rolled on his back, fear making him freeze up. He still refused to let go of the heavy duffel bag. I cursed myself for going back to get him. I had an idea come to me, one that could save us if I was lucky. If I wasn't, we would pass in the next few seconds, and that would be that. I slid over, putting myself between Neff and Murray. "Wait," I shouted, one hand up to try and stop the incoming shovel. By some miracle, Neff did stop. A confused smile came upon his face. "Listen, so Murray has people after him, right? Bad people. Well, what if you just protected him from those people? How many would go after him if they thought he killed a member of theirs and he owed them money? At least a few, more than 3 of us killing, right? More than 3, so killing us right now would be losing out." The air was heavy between us after I spoke, and Murray was still on the ground, nearly panting from fear. Neff just stood there as still as a statue, those horrible red eyes glowing through the sunglasses directly towards me. I'd nearly lost all hope when Neff started moving again. I flinched when he tossed the shovel above our heads, and I could have sworn I heard it take out some trees in its path as it flew into the forest surrounding us. I felt strong arms wrap around me, lifting me off the ground. It felt like he was trying to squeeze me. But Neff was just hugging me. Oh, you wonderful human, such a good idea. How silly of me for not thinking of this. I was set down and nearly collapsed from stress. Somehow I'd gotten on that monster's good side. And Murray looked at me also stressed but thankful for my desperate idea. We had to hold on to each other, trying to stay steady enough to walk to the car. About the other corpse, Murray said. Murray said after a few steps, making Neff stop. Well, we all looked at the bumbling zombie that had started all of this, and I wondered about it too. What would happen to him? Would we just bring him with us? What corpse? As Neff walked by the zombie, he didn't even acknowledge it. In 2 steps, he was in front of it, and the creature suddenly burst into a short-lived flame. In the blink of an eye, it turned into ash and scattered into the wind. I did not want to ride with them or sit in the back seat that still smelt like death. Oh, I bet you it did. And oddly enough, Neff was kind enough to drive me back to work. I suffered through the trip back listening to music I didn't understand, smelling traces of rotting flesh all around me in fear of my life. And I'd never been so happy to see my workplace of mine in my entire life. Neff parked by the pumps and got out. He had taken off his sunglasses and I finally saw his full face for the first time. His eyes were in fact red and unsettling. He nearly ripped off the door when he opened it and grabbed me by the front of my ruined uniform. With one final ominous wink, he very rudely pulled me out of the car and tossed me across the lot. I don't think he meant to break my arm when he tossed me, but he nearly did. He either didn't know his own strength or didn't know how fragile humans were. That car was speeding off into the night when my manager came out frantic. A regular had seen the state of the store and called him. He had just called the police when I was being dropped off. And in a few minutes the place was swarming with red lights and I didn't have a good story for them. I know the cops are never going to arrest somebody for my few hours of being kidnapped. I'm fine with that. I had to quit my job and I moved across the country to not only start fresh but to get away from what I saw that night. I hope Murray is doing all right, but I never want to know more about that necromancer. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be back. I've got another quick one we can get into here. And if you're in the UK right now, we are 7 minutes from
3:33 a.m.
Can't beat a bit of good late night woo, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit of storytelling, yes. We will revive the dying art of telling stories right here on After Dark on KBS. I hope you're all having fun out there. A little bit creepy, that one, the old necromancers. Yes, indeedy. A little bit of necromancy on a Tuesday morning over here in the UK in the wee hours of the morning. Nearly 3:33. Boys, oh boys. Now, there looks like there's a human kind of coming into my stream, but we're okay. It's okay. I know who it is. Don't worry, folks. I'm not summoning any ghosties. Not yet. Not yet. But we have got another story that we can get into right here, right now. Yes, indeed. This one looks a lot shorter. A lot shorter. This is a quick one. And we'll get another one after this. But this one's called I Was Asked to Look After My Neighbour's Cat. Never again. So my neighbour asked me to the house to sit for him while he was away for the week. There wasn't much to the job. I was to make sure that his cat was fed twice a day and clean up the litter tray. It seemed really simple, and Carl was a nice enough neighbour. He was quiet, kept to himself, but he asked me to look after his cat while he went to visit the hospital across the country. Carl gave me 2 simple rules. Number 1, make sure that the cat was being fully fed before sundown, and 2, do not let the cat outside. What's your cat's name? I asked Carl. Is it a boy or a girl? Oh, it doesn't have a name, he shook his head. And I don't know. Its food is in the cupboard under the sink. I found that all a little bit odd that Carl didn't name his pet, but I brushed it off as an eccentricity of a strange neighbour. I fed the cat this morning, Carl said, so if you just feed it later, before sunset, that'll be enough. Sure thing, Carl, I nodded. Now, before he left, Carl gave me his mobile phone number and a spare key to his house, and with that, he drove off. When I returned to Carl's house later that day, I did not see the cat. I went to the kitchen and saw an empty food bowl with the residue of some cat food smeared around its edges, and a half-empty water bowl. I washed out the food and water bowls and refilled their contents. I waited for the cat to come to its food, but it never came. I assumed the cat was just shy, not used to having strangers around, and went to the litter tray to clean it. I left Carl's house and thought nothing more about the encounter. The next day, I went back to Carl's house to feed the cat once more. Again, I didn't see the cat, but went through the routine of cleaning out the bowls and litter tray and making sure a tin of food was out for the cat. I did the same when I finished work too. I was displeased that I hadn't seen the cat, and I was hoping to have at least played with it just once, but I noticed that Carl didn't have many cat toys lying around. In fact, I didn't notice a single one. I thought that they were perhaps upstairs, but aside from the cat food and the bowls, not much else about Carl's place suggested he even had a pet. There was no claw marks on the furniture, no hair about the place, and there wasn't even that smell you sometimes get where a cat lives. There were the bowls, and there was a litter tray, but nothing else. It wasn't until Friday when I made my first mistake. Some of my colleagues invited me to drinks with them after work, so I tagged along. I hadn't realised quite how late it was until I got back to my house. Oh crap, I thought. I didn't feed the cat. Didn't feed the cat. I was able to dash in through the door of Carl's house to feed the cat, but instead I laughed at my unnecessary panic. It wouldn't exactly be the end of the world if a cat had to wait an extra hour for its food, would it? So I went to my own home first to sort my things out before walking over to Carl's to feed the cat. I entered and closed the door behind me, and I walked straight past the living room to the kitchen. On my way, I was stopped in my tracks by a voice. The living room lights flickered on. Where is my food, Carl? The voice, smooth like butter, flowed from an unknown source. Excuse me? I spun around, trying to see where the voice had come from. Oh, you're not Carl. No, no, I'm not. I'm Jake. Ah, you're the new one, are you? And with that, a black and white cat emerged from underneath the coffee table in the living room. Well, I'll let you off this once. Oh my God, I reeled back. What the hell? The cat prowled around, just weaving past my legs. I stumbled backwards, almost standing on it, but the cat lodged my tumbling motions. And the cat dodged it as well, seemingly. Watch your step, it hissed, and it jolted into the air and hovered there. A black glow, an aura of darkness swirled around it as it floated in the middle of the room. As if it was engulfed in this blackness. I saw its fur melt away to reveal a skeletal form underneath, remaining only were its great glowing eyes in their cavernous sockets. Right, you want food. I tried to dart into the kitchen, but the black aura surrounded the door as it slammed before me. Wait right there, the cat purred, still suspended in midair. Understand that being a cat is already undignified. I don't need servants who forget the times at which I require meals. All right, I promise it won't happen again. I fed the cat, then left as soon as I could. The final days went smoothly, and you guessed it, I wasn't late again. I did as I was required and made sure that the doors were locked upon my exiting the house. Carl returned, and immediately I could tell that he knew something was wrong when I returned his spare key. You saw it, didn't you? Yeah, I did. Well, don't worry. You won't need to do it again. Carl went back to his quiet life after that. I tried a few times to ask him about the cat, but Carl shrugged and refused to divulge anything more than I already knew. I decided it best to stop pestering him, since Carl was obviously content to keep things the way they were. I would just like to know the reason for Carl's second rule. What exactly would happen if the cat got out? Woo. I'll be back in just a moment with one more strange, unexplained mystery. Okay, so I think we're affecting cats. We're affecting cats on the stream, ladies and gents. It's never a good thing. But King Sweet just said this music just made my cat wake up like it's seen a demon. And then it bit me. Ooh, not good, not good. So listen, we're going to come over here for our last one. Let me see. There we go. If I blow this up. It's called The Mysterious Case of Todd C's. Yes, indeed. And this comes from the Reddit again. r/unresolved mysteries. And this looks like it could be something right out of Missing 411, okay? I've read little bits of it, not all of it in depth, but let's go for it. And after we do this, I will let you all get back about your day, ladies and gentlemen. I wouldn't imagine there's anyone new here right now, but if you catch this in the archive or you're watching at a later date, please remember to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and if you want to support the channel further, but you don't have to, we've got memberships here. We're trying to get to the next level of membership so we can unlock a new emoji. But with that out of the way, let's get back into our final story of today. Now, I did mean to rhyme that one. So it says, first time post, long time browser. Happened upon this case recently. Never heard of it before. Thought it would be an interesting read for persons here. Sorry if I messed up some of the formatting. Oh, you're okay. You're okay so far. 39-year-old Pennsylvania hunter, an outdoorsman, Todd C, wakes before dawn and decides to go deer spotting on Monter Ridge, a mountain range behind his home in Point Township, Northumberland County. Now, he leaves his home at 5 a.m., telling his wife he'll be back by noon, and drives his ATV up a tree break where a power line runs. C's is the son of a farmer, a family man, a little league coach and the father of two, and when he fails to return by the appointed time, his wife grows concerned and calls the police. Get a quick drink here, folks. So shortly thereafter, C's son finds his father's four-wheeler abandoned at the top of the ridge, 2 miles from their house. By 2:30, a large search party has been mobilised. They discover no footprints leading away from the ATV and no scent for their dogs to track. Well, that's weird. Over 200 volunteers and rescue personnel continue combing the area with dogs. Now, skin divers search a nearby pond and others scour a 6-mile radius for any sign of the man. And day one ends with Mr. C's still missing. The search continues throughout the following day. Around 8 o'clock on the second night, somebody spots a patch of white in the woods near the pond, a mere 150 yards from the C's residence. Local firemen work feverishly with saws and axes to cut a path through the heavy brushes, and there, in a dense bramble, they find the deceased body of Todd C's. Now, witnesses describe him as dressed only in his boxers, emaciated, and wearing a countenance of abject terror. No one from the family is ever called in to identify the body, and contrary to Pennsylvania law, the body is removed without a coroner present. Now, Northumberland County Coroner James Kelly conducts an immediate autopsy, but his results are inconclusive. With no significant external or internal injuries, there is no clear cause of passing. So he eventually turns the body to the family in a sealed casket and strongly suggests they do not open it. C's is buried sight unseen, as his poor, grieving family do the best they can to pick up the pieces, with much help and support from the local community. So a toxicology report released months later suggests cocaine toxicity as the probable cause of passing. Local police close the investigation. News coverage was surprisingly scant, and that is basically the sum total of the unassailable facts. The strange circumstances of the case, however, and the similarity to other rural events involving missing persons, almost immediately attracted the interest of the paranormal researchers, particularly those in the UFO community. Despite an understandable stonewalling from local police trying to protect the C's family, follow-up investigations by controversial ufologist Peter Davenport and former homicide detective Butch Witkowski produced quite a bit of additional information, all of it decidedly of the alleged variety. Wonder Cabinet, and that's the name of the website, can find no official verification of these details, and they should be taken with a healthy grain of salt. That said, even if you disregard the UFO angle entirely, the case leaves behind a haunting impression of a man experiencing a harrowing final ordeal. So, some of the details here. Number one of Todd C's boots was found 75 feet up a tree at 5:30 on the morning in question. 3 nearby farmers and a fisherman on the Susquehanna River witnessed a disc-shaped UFO over Montour Ridge. An anonymously filed, mistakenly dated report to this effect was submitted later in August 2002 to the National UFO Reporting Centre, and additional reports provide even stranger details. It says numerous accounts of the FBI descended quickly on the scene and instructing locals not to speak to the press. So it's got another kind of, and of course the page is missing now. What's quite interesting about that is I remember Lon Strickler coming onto the show because he's good friends with Butch Witkowski. They've actually worked together many times. And I remember Lon talking about this very, very case. Very strange indeed. And I think a very good way to wrap up our little after dark extravaganza today. I've had fun. I hope you've had fun. I'll be back doing this more often, ladies and gents. I know we don't get vast numbers of people here, but hopefully over time we'll start to grow it a little bigger, a little better. And when we do it either tomorrow night or the next night, I'm actually going to sit and I'm going to specifically find stories of a particular theme and ones that are going to take the woo to really creepy levels. We won't crowdsource them on the show. We'll do one crowdsource on the show. You can pick one story. I'll give you a selection to choose from. But I will pre-read and make sure that we get 3 or 4 stories that follow on, and they're all kind of similar. They'll all either be about animals, hauntings, some kind of cryptid, you name it, we're going to go there. So with that said, thank you all so much for your time. Means the world to me. Really, really does. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope I haven't scared you too much. And I'll be back tomorrow, Same time. Well, I don't know if it'll be same time, same place tomorrow, but I'll definitely be on the Kev Baker show tomorrow with Nano Girl and Jules. I hope you can all make it for that. So until then, folks,
Keep your mind open. Keep looking for the woo, but not to the point where your brain turns to black goo.
Mr. Naysay in the chat room. We've got Lady Smith, Marty, Lewis, Jocelyn. King is in there. Bernays. Bet, good to see you. Berean Jean, or Berean Jen, good to see you. Jules, who I mentioned a moment ago, she'll be on KBS tomorrow. If you're here, if you've been watching, if you've been listening, thank you all so much. Have a great night, have a great day, good night, and God bless.